sustainability is not a quick win. It's a long-term commitment, sometimes being driven more by marketing rather than by what is truly happening inside the organization. So when organizations shift their mindset and see CSRD as a strategic tool, they move from simply complying to building a future-ready organization. The program Strategic Communication for Sustainability is designed for executives who want to integrate sustainability into their communication strategy, not just in words, but in ways that have practical and meaningful applications, enforcing alignment in everyday business activities and decisions. So basically, the key part of the program is communication, how to communicate sustainability clearly, avoid greenwashing, and build trust with stakeholders. We start with the basics of the European Green Deal and how it links environmental, social, and governance policies. Then, we work on how to define the clear, cost-based purpose and work with the 5 principles that make organizations truly purpose-driven. Throughout the program, we focus on leadership, management practices, and HR strategies as the key drivers of real implementation. Because in the end, sustainability, it's not just theory, it's how an organization thinks, decides, and acts on an everyday basis. When stakeholders hear the term sustainability strategy, their first reaction is often to see it as a cost, an economic burden that requires investment from current cash flow. But in reality, like any strategic investment, if it's well designed, it delivers a strong return, both financially and in a long-term value. The second concern that often comes up is greenwashing. This is largely due to high-profile cases where companies made promises that didn't match their actual practices and faced reputational and legal consequences. This has created skepticism because sustainability has sometimes been driven more by marketing rather than by what is truly happening inside the organization. So the key challenge is alignment. Organizations need to ensure that all departments are working together so that what they communicate externally is fully supported by internal processes and real outcomes. And in case that credibility has been lost, leadership must rebuild trust from the inside out through clear communication, shared purpose, and consistency between words and actions. Ultimately, sustainability is not what you say, it's what you do consistently. The most dangerous gap between sustainability reports and Monday morning operations is the disconnect between what companies promise and what they actually prioritize. Sustainability reports often present strong values, long-term commitments, and a sense of responsibility. But in a day-to-day operations, under pressure from budgets, deadlines, and efficiency demands, those commitments are often pushed aside. So what's written in reports doesn't always survive real-world decision-making. At the heart of this gap is the human factor. If people within the organization don't feel engaged or don't trust that acting sustainably is truly valued and recognized, then those behaviors simply won't be sustained. Because in reality, people prioritize what they are measured and rewarded for. So closing this gap requires more than strategy. It requires aligning incentives, building trust, and embedding sustainability into everyday actions. Only then can commitments on paper become consistent actions in practice. CSRD reporting is often perceived as a bureaucratic burden, mainly because it's a relatively new requirement that demands time, resources, and structure. And many organizations still approach it as a compliance exercise, something to complete, submit, and move on from, a box-ticking process. But in reality, CSRD is much more than that. It forces organizations to identify risks and impacts, and to think long-term about how they safeguard their future. It brings focus to environmental, social, and governance priorities, not as abstract concepts, but as areas that must be actively managed and sustained. Because sustainability resources are not endless nor easily negotiable at times, and this is becoming increasingly evident in today's global environment with so many geopolitical challenges. At the same time, sustainability is deeply connected to people. New generations expect purpose, balance, and ethical leadership, and organizations need to respond to that. This is also where AI plays an important role. It can support better measurement, efficiency, and decision-making, but only when used responsibly. So when organizations shift their mindset and see CSRD as a strategic tool, connecting resources, people, and technology, they move from simply complying to building a future-ready organization. It is very common to hear from a CFO's perspective that purpose is nice, but it doesn't move the profit and loss. And that's understandable because a P&L reflects short-term annual performance, but sustainability operates on a different timeline. It's a long-term strategy, and its return on investment may take years to fully materialize. So naturally, you may not see immediate impact within a single financial year. However, sustainability goes beyond short-term reporting. It supports the long-term viability of the organization, what we refer to as the going concern in a broader sense. A purpose-driven organization acts as a guardian of future generations, making decisions not just for today, but for those who will be affected tomorrow. And while that may not instantly shift the profit and loss, it strengthens resilience, relevance, and long-term success. A great example is IBM. They introduced their first environmental policy as early as in 1971, and over time transformed their entire business model from manufacturing to being a hybrid cloud and AI. That kind of evolution shows that sustainability is not a quick win. It's a long-term commitment that builds a future-ready organization. Beyond the head of ESG, there are 3 key roles that are already shaping sustainability communication, but are rarely trained to do so effectively. First, it's the CFO, because every sustainability decision eventually translates into numbers, investment choices, and risk assessments. If the CFO cannot communicate the financial logic of sustainability, credibility is immediately weakened. Second are the HR leaders. They are responsible for embedding sustainability into culture through hiring, succession planning, performance management, and employee engagement. But often, they are not equipped to connect sustainability with behaviors and incentives. And third, the operations managers, because this is where sustainability actually happens, in procurement, processes, and daily decision-making. If they don't understand how to communicate trade-offs and priorities, then the gap between strategy and execution grows. So, in reality, sustainability communication is not a single function, it's a distributed responsibility. And unless these roles are trained and aligned, organizations risk saying the right things externally, but failing to deliver them internally.